Yesterday was Good Friday, and tomorrow is going to be Easter for Catholic and other Western Christian denominations. UMD would like to say Happy Good Friday and Easter to all the followers of this faith around the world. To those who still in the fasting season, we wish you a blessed moment as well. In connection with this, several religious fathers are delivering benedictions and messages. We will look at one of the messages from Ethiopia later today. Hello and welcome to our Saturday, April 16, 2022 program. This is Shimelis Gebremichael with UMD News Package for today. We invite you all to stay with the program, and for your feedbacks, please use our email address newstips2020umd at gmail.com. UMD extensively works in understanding, measuring, and doing matters. Our news team attempts to update you with the latest in Ethiopia, the Horn, Africa, and the world in general. Any of your support, including the provisions of news tips, comments, questions, and suggestions, are always welcomed. Before we jump in to our news package, here are the headlines for the major news that we chose to present to you today. WHO chief blames racism for greater focus on Ukraine than Ethiopia. UN says 9 million in need of aid in South Sudan. Hospital in Tigray struggles to treat patients. What is happening to the patients and medical practitioners? How has been and is the world responding? If you stay with our program until the end, you will find out the essence of this story. Now, we will move into providing more information on these and other news items. As we always say, please do not forget to like and share our programs and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, view our programs in other platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. In our first segment, to look into some brief news from Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa. The opening news takes us to Ethiopian Catholic Church news. Cardinal Surafel hopes negotiation, bringing
Means that
lasting
in
peace to
Ethiopia,
Ethiopia.
Christians and Muslims have always lived together peacefully. They even collaborated in the
Cardinal Surafel hopes negotiations bringing lasting peace to Ethiopia. Cardinal Berhane Jesus Surafel of Addis Ababa, the head of the Ethiopian Catholic Church, praised the ongoing negotiations will bring lasting peace. In an interview with Vatican News, Cardinal Surafel discusses the crisis enveloping Ethiopia, as the nation has suffered from civil war and famine. While the Cardinal acknowledged that the situation has slightly improved as negotiations are underway and since Pope Francis has made appeal for peace, the humanitarian emergency continues. Many religious fathers in Ethiopia have been criticized for not being vocal about the violence, conflicts, and wars in the country over the last few years. Most have been accused of aligning with the government, which puts many into disappointment and distress, especially those who suffered because of the concurrent wars in the country. Over 2 million people have been displaced, and thousands are dead because of the civil war between the Tigray forces and the federal forces and other wars in the country. Hunger is now becoming the cause of death and suffering in Ethiopia. WHO chief blames racism for greater focus on Ukraine than Ethiopia.
but even a fraction of it is not being given to Tigray, Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, and the rest. A fraction.
WHO chief blames racism for greater focus on Ukraine than Ethiopia. World Health Organization WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the world is not treating the human race the same way amid the Tigray crisis. The head of the World Health Organization (WHO) has criticized the global community's focus on the war in Ukraine, arguing that crises elsewhere, including his home country of Ethiopia, are not being given equal consideration, possibly because of the people affected are not white. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus questioned whether the world really gives equal attention to black and white lives, given that ongoing emergencies in Ethiopia, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Syria had garnered only a fraction of the concern from Ukraine. Last month, Tedros said that there was nowhere on earth where the health of millions of people is more under threat than Ethiopia's Tigray region. Since a truce was declared in Tigray 3 weeks ago, about 2,000 trucks should have been able to bring food, medicines, and other essentials to the conflict ridden area, he said during a virtual press briefing from Geneva on Wednesday. He said in a state only about 20 trucks had arrived. He acknowledged that the war in Ukraine was globally significant, but asked whether other crises were being accorded enough attention. Dr. Tedros says, I need to be blunt and honest that the world is not treating the human race the same way. Some are more equal than others. He also criticized the media's failure to document atrocities in Ethiopia, noting that people had been burned alive. Earlier this year, the Ethiopian government sent a letter to the WHO accusing Tedros of misconduct after his sharp criticism of the war and humanitarian crisis in the country. This puts many in despair and surprise as Dr. Tedros has been speaking out of curiosity and considering the dire humanitarian needs of millions of civilians in his home country. Meanwhile, new aid convoys for Ethiopia's Tigray after the truth.
Reaching those in desperate need. According to the United Nations, 9 million people in the northern regions of Tigray, Amara, and Afar need food assistance.
Humanitarian agencies said 47 aid convoys arrived in Tigray on Thursday, April 14, 2022. The trucks have transported food, nutrition, and other life saving supplies and 3 fuel tankers. According to the latest reports, aid deliveries by road to the stricken region of 6 million people were cut off in mid December, and only limited medical and other supplies could be flown in. But the first new convoy sent by the UN's World Food Programme and the International Committee of the Red Cross finally arrived at the beginning of April, about a week after the truce was declared. The institutions also said the convoy also carried essential equipment for the Orthopedic Rehabilitation Center. The convoys had encountered a smooth journey so far with the support from all authorities. The truce between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government and the TPLF continues to hold, allowing aid to reach the battered region. The new deliveries coincide with U.S. Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, David Satterfield's trip to Ethiopia, as Washington steps up diplomatic pressure to allow aid to flow to Tigray. We have, however, heard that Abiy's government didn't allow the envoy to travel to Tigray. Despite all these complex situations in Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is still proudly talking about political and economic gains in the country. The Prime Minister has recently told his military commanders that the country is registering political and economic gains since 2020. His optimism that Ethiopia could achieve a development like most East Asian countries looks like a copy paste from Eritrea's Isaias Afwerki. However, as some leaked information have it, the Prime Minister looks highly concerned about the military and security issues in all corners of the country. Meanwhile, the US government accuses the Ethiopian government of alleged right abuse. The US government has released the 2021 Human Rights Report on Ethiopia. It made numerous serious accusations of rights abuse by the Ethiopian government. Arbitrary killing, detention, restriction of freedom of expression and freedom of assembly, and serious corruption are some of the allegations that the US and the US government has made. America's Department of State has highlighted the humanitarian abuses in all corners of the country. The US has used several sources to compile the comprehensive report. According to the report, security forces had detained between 5,000 to 7,000 individuals since the government declared a state of emergency on November 2, 2021, noting this information was based on preliminary information and likely an underestimate. There were also reports of widespread disappearances based on ethnicity in Western Tigray. South Omo Zone appeals for government help after very tragic arrest displaces thousands. The administration of the South Omo Zone in southern nations, nationalities, and peoples regions state SNN PRS appealed for government help to rehabilitate thousands of civilians displaced by a very tragic unrest recently. South Omo Zone Chief Administrator Ngatu Densa and other senior government officials visited the displaced civilians and the injured. Ngatu described the unrest as very tragic and promised that legal and administrative measures would be taken against perpetrators. Addis Standard media quoted officials of the zone as saying that on 11th of April, uh, 132 suspects were initially arrested and suspected of involvement in the arrest of whom 22 individuals have since been released. The arrest, as reported by Addis Standard, has caused heavy property damage in Mester, Tolta, and several areas of South Ari Warada, where the residents fled from and have sought refuge in religious institutions, schools, and police stations. UN says 9 million in need of aid in South Sudan. The UN's envoy to South Sudan warned on Thursday that almost 9 million people in need of aid this year as the fragile country grapples with a surge in violence between armed factions and a food crisis. Clashes have flared anew in the world's youngest nation despite a pledge by President Salva Kiir and his rival Vice President Riek Machar to silence their guns and strive towards implementing key provisions of a 2018 peace pact. Nicholas Haysom, the head of the UN mission in South Sudan, called on the leaders to step up efforts to quell the violence and urged the international community to channel more assistance. This year, two-thirds of the population, or almost 9 million people, 4.6 million of which are children, will need aid to survive. Hassan told reporters in the capital, Juba. The clashes in Lear country sent 14,000 people fleeing, according to the local authorities, while the UN also voiced alarm about reports of sexual violence, looting, and destruction of property. South Sudan has been racked by instability since independence in 2011 and is still struggling to draw a line under the war that claimed the lives of almost 400,000 people. Now we will move into one story we have chosen to present to you in more detail. So that is hospital in Tigray struggles to treat patients. How and why? That is next.
And this conflict is going to come to an end, and people are going to need medical attention now more than ever. How is the ICRC planning to get aid to the people in need?
Hospital in Tigray struggles to treat patients. How and why? That's next. According to health officials in Tigray, patients at the flagship hospital in the region are dying amid shortages of life-saving drugs and oxygen. A doctor at Aider Hospital in Ma'ala, Tigray's capital, told the Associated Press at least 60 patients with kidney disease have died since July, the result of a lack of supplies needed for regular dialysis. The doctor said another 81 patients have died directly because of a lack of oxygen since the conflict between the federal government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The conflict was erupted, or the war was erupted in November 2020. The doctor spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of reprisals. Tigray has been cut off from the rest of the country since late June. Its road networks, banking services, and phone lines are all severed, a situation the United Nations has described as a de facto blockade imposed by Ethiopia's federal government. The hospital's 3,600 staff have not been paid for months, and many do not have enough money to buy food, hospital officials said, highlighting challenges that reflect a wide humanitarian crisis in the region. More than 90% of Tigray's 6 million people require humanitarian assistance, including 115,000 children who are severely malnourished, according to UN figures. Some shortages have been alleviated by aid flights operated by the World Health Organization and the International Committee of the Red Cross, which have flown in 438 metric tons of medical and nutritious supplies since late January. But these supplies represent only 4% of what is required, according to experts. As a result, staff at either hospital say they have resorted to washing and reusing surgical gloves and treating patients with expired medicines. They are also recycling plastic breathing tubes and items used for dialysis, the doctor said. This is really risky for the patients. They can die of infections and other complications, and doctors elsewhere in the world would be shocked to hear we are doing this. The hospital also has been forced to cancel surgeries because of power cuts and a lack of supplies. Some services have been forced to close altogether, including a cancer center, which has treated 1,769 patients since November 2020, but has now run out of drugs for chemotherapy. He said, since July, we received no chemotherapy drugs at all. We just tell the cancer patients to go back home and they die. There is nothing we can do for them. A surgeon at the hospital, who also asked not to be named for safety reasons, said that the stock of intravenous fluids has run so slow that colleagues have resorted to making their own using different chemicals from the hospital's store. The surgeon said it is not ideal. It means when patients go into shock, you can't uh, resuscitate them. It is so frustrating. You need to insert an IV line and give fluids, but there are no fluids. He said shortages are so dire that some patients' relatives must personally buy medicines from private pharmacies at inflated prices and bring them to the hospital before their family members can be treated. The doctor said patients with kidney diseases are currently receiving dialysis once a week, down from 3 times a week before the war, while the hospital is unable to admit new patients with kidney disease due to lack of supplies. Ethiopian authorities declared an immediate humanitarian truce on March 24, a move they said would allow aid to enter Tigray. But since then, just one convoy of 28 trucks and one fuel tanker have entered Tigray, far short of 100 trucks the UN says must enter every day to meet the region's needs. Tens of thousands of people have been killed in the war, according to estimates by international aid groups. But there is little hope to peace talks as Ethiopian authorities have outlawed the TPLF, effectively making its leaders fugitive on the run. The report concludes. Well, with that, we come to an end of the news for today. Once again, to all Christians, we wish you a happy Good Friday and Easter. This has been Shimelis Marissa Gebremichael here at UMD Media. Please do not forget to like and share our program and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow our programs through our other platforms as well to become the first to know what's going on in Ethiopia, the Horn, Africa, and the world in general. You can easily reach us via our email address, newstips2020umd at gmail.com. Thank you for watching and have a good one.